Sleepcast. A winter night. Inside the Buffalo Hide Lodge. A relaxing sleep narration for long winter nights. Welcome, dear listener. Come in. Settle yourself down somewhere soft and warm. Pull your blanket up around your shoulders. Let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting tonight. And allow yourself to arrive here, fully and gently, in this quiet moment. Tonight we are going somewhere far away, somewhere that exists now only in history, only in the memories carried through oral tradition, in the faded pages of old journals, and in the careful work of those who study the past. We are going to a place that is cold and vast and wild outside, but soft and glowing and deeply, peacefully warm within. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great open plain. The sky above you is heavy and dark, or layered with clouds the colour of charcoal and pale pewter, moving slowly, pressing downward toward the earth. The wind has been building for hours, sweeping in long invisible currents across the flat white land, carrying with it the smell of deep winter, clean and sharp and faintly sweet. The way very cold air always smells, like something frozen and pure. Snow is falling, not the light, decorative kind that drifts lazily on calm evenings. This is a serious snow, a purposeful snow, driven by the wind so that it moves almost horizontally in places, hissing against every surface it meets, collecting in long, smooth drifts along the ground. The land is disappearing beneath it slowly and completely. Every blade of grass, every stone, every footpath smoothed over and buried under a growing whiteness that stretches all the way to the horizon. And there, just ahead of you, glowing warm and amber against all that darkness, is a teepee, a single dwelling, cone-shaped and beautiful, its hide walls lit softly from within by the light of a fire burning inside. From a distance, it looks almost like a lantern, a small golden flame in the middle of all that cold, dark and white. Smoke threads upward from the small opening at its crown, rising straight for a moment before the wind catches it and pulls it sideways, dissolving it into the grey sky. You're going inside tonight. You're going to spend the long hours of this winter storm sheltered within those hide walls, surrounded by the warmth of a small fire, the breathing of sleeping family members, the sounds of dogs shifting and sighing, the muffled song of the blizzard outside. You are going to experience what it was like for native families of the North American plains to sleep through the fiercest nights of winter, nested in their extraordinary mobile homes, centuries before the modern world existed. So breathe in now, a slow, easy breath. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, let your eyes grow a little heavier. You do not need to go anywhere or do anything tonight. You only need to listen and let the story carry you gently into rest. We are stepping inside. The world goes warm around you. The sound of the storm dulls to a soft rhythmic murmur, and the night begins. Part 2. The architecture of the lodge. Take a moment as you settle yourself inside the dim warmth of the lodge to simply notice where you are. The space around you is circular. That is the first thing you feel as much as see. The gentle curve of the walls drawing inward above you, rising upward along the slant of long wooden poles that meet at a single point far overhead. Dozens of these poles, cut and trimmed and carefully smoothed, radiate outward from that central peak like the spokes of an enormous wheel seen from below. They give the structure its distinctive conical shape, that unmistakable silhouette that has stood against the plain's wind for countless generations. Stretched over those poles are hides. Buffalo hides primarily, though other animals too contributed their skins to the making of this shelter. The hides are large, much larger than you might expect, each one representing the full skin of an adult bison, scraped clean of hair on one side, treated with animal brain or fat to make it supple, and then smoked to give it flexibility and water resistance. Multiple hides have been stitched together along their edges using thread made from the sinew of the same animals, creating one continuous covering that wraps the entire cone of the lodge from its base upward to just below the smoke opening at the top. The stitching is careful and deliberate. You can see, if you look closely at the interior surface of the walls, how the seams run diagonally, overlapping rather than meeting straight on, so that there is no single line of weakness, no clean gap where wind might find a way through. Every seam is an engineering decision made not with blueprints or calculations, but with the accumulated knowledge of generations of builders who learned through long cold experience what worked and what failed. Our historical accounts vary on exactly how many hides were needed to construct a family lodge of typical size, but estimates gathered from various sources and oral traditions generally suggest somewhere between 12 and 20, sometimes more for a larger family. This was not a small undertaking. Each hide represented a hunt, a kill, the labour of butchering, the patient effort of processing the skin through days of scraping and stretching and softening. Every inch of wall around you tonight is the product of many hours of careful human work. At the very base of the lodge, the hides drape down and are pegged close to the ground. In the summer months, this lower edge could be rolled up slightly to allow breezes to pass through, cooling the interior. But in winter, everything is drawn tight and secured, with stones or short stakes hold the hide edges firmly against the earth, preventing the wind from crawling underneath. And where the snow has been drifting against the outer walls all night, it has begun to pack itself naturally into the gaps, filling every tiny space between the hide and the ground with a dense, insulating layer of compressed white crystal. The snow does not know it is helping. It is simply following the wind, piling where the structure deflects it, banking up along the base in a way that, from inside, you can actually feel. The drafts that might otherwise slither along the floor have grown quieter as the hours have passed. The blizzard's cold breath, turned against itself, now forms an extra wall of insulation around the lodge's perimeter. This is something that many historians and anthropologists have discussed and debated at length, whether native families on the northern plains deliberately encouraged these snowbanks or simply welcomed them when they appeared. Some accounts suggest that during particularly brutal storms, people did actively pack snow against the lower walls, shoveling it into place rather than clearing it away. Others argue the practice varied widely depending on the region, the severity of the weather, and the specific knowledge of the family involved. Perhaps both are true in different proportions, in different places, in different winters. The evidence is not always clear. But what remains consistent across many accounts is the understanding that the storm's own materials could be turned to the benefit of those sheltering inside. You let yourself rest against a pile of soft furs near the inner wall. The hide surface behind your back is cool to the touch, but not uncomfortably so. The warmth from the fire at the center of the lodge radiates toward you steadily, and the cold from the wall is a gentle contrast rather than a threat. Between the fire and the packed snow outside, between the smoked hides and the sinew stitching, between all the layers of animal skin and human ingenuity, you are held safely through the storm. Rest here a moment. Simply breathe. Notice how quiet your body is becoming, how the sound of the wind, still audible as a low, steady roar beyond the walls, has begun to feel less like danger and more like background music. A rhythm, a presence, something vast and cold that circles the lodge but cannot enter. You are safe inside this circle. Let yourself feel that. Part 3. The fire at the center. Your eyes drift toward the middle of the lodge, drawn by warmth and light both. The fire is there, settled into a shallow depression at the very heart of the circular floor, its flames low and steady, burning with the calm confidence of a fire that has been well tended, neither racing ahead nor threatening to go out. Someone added fuel not long ago, just enough to keep the warmth consistent without using more than necessary, because on a night like this, with the storm outside and the supply of fuel carefully rationed, every piece of wood or dry dung is a small treasure. The flames are mostly amber and gold tonight, with occasional edges of blue near the base where the heat is most concentrated. They do not crackle loudly or spit dramatically. They breathe almost, rising and settling in a slow rhythm that feels almost alive, almost like something with its own quiet intentions. The light they cast is soft and moving, painting the interior walls of the lodge in shifting tones of orange and deep shadow, making the whole enclosed space feel warm, not just in temperature, but in color. The design of the teepee and the placement of its fire were not accidents. The cone shape was ideally suited to managing heat and smoke in a way that kept the interior livable, even in the deepest cold. Warm air, as you perhaps know from simple observation, rises naturally. The fire at the center of the lodge produced heat that traveled upward along the sloping walls, and that rising column of warmth drew cooler air in near the base, creating a gentle, the continuous circulation that fed oxygen to the flames, while also moving the smoke upward and out through the opening at the top. The smoke hole was adjustable, 2 large flaps of hide, extending above the main body of the lodge on either side of the opening, could be repositioned using long poles from inside. When the wind shifted direction during a storm, a knowing hand would quietly reposition those flaps to prevent smoke from being pushed back downward into the living space. This small act of adjustment, performed perhaps several times through the course of a single night, kept the air inside breathable while allowing the fire to continue burning. Travelers and explorers who spent time in native camps during the 18th and 19th centuries frequently remarked on the warmth they found inside the lodges during winter storms. Several wrote with considerable surprise that the interior was comfortable, even pleasant, and some admitted with varying degrees of reluctant admiration that the teepee outperformed many of the log structures and canvas shelters they were accustomed to. One such account describes a man arriving at a camp with frost in his beard and his fingers barely functional from the cold, only to step inside a lodge and find the air warm enough to remove his heaviest outer coat within minutes. There were always scholars and historians who debated the finer details of just how warm these lodges actually became, and how evenly the heat was distributed. Some argued that the warmth was concentrated most powerfully within a relatively small radius around the fire itself, and leaving those sleeping near the outer walls to rely more on furs and body heat than on the fire's direct radiance. Others described accounts where the interior was warm throughout, suggesting a more efficient distribution of heat than skeptics allowed for. The truth, as with so many things in history, was probably variable, shifting with the size of the lodge, the number of people inside, the quality of the hides, the fierceness of the storm, and the skill of whoever was keeping the fire. What is consistent across many accounts is the description of fire as something more than functional. For many of the nations who lived on the plains, fire was a living presence within the home. Not in a figurative or poetic sense alone, but in a genuine, deeply felt, spiritual understanding. The fire was acknowledged, spoken to, sometimes in whispered words, tended with a kind of care that went beyond the practical need to keep it burning. Small offerings, a pinch of dried herbs, a fragment of fat, a few dried berries, might be placed into the flames before sleep as a quiet gesture of gratitude and respect. The smoke rising from such offerings was understood to carry those gestures upward, into a realm beyond the visible. Anthropologists and historians have spent considerable time discussing this dimension of fire's role in winter lodge life, debating whether these practices were primarily spiritual, primarily psychological, or some intermingling of both that resists clean categorization. The debate is interesting and unresolved, and perhaps that is as it should be. Some things in human experience do not separate cleanly into body and spirit, into practical and sacred. The fire in the center of this lodge tonight serves warmth and serves meaning both, and neither function diminishes the other. Let your eyes rest on those quiet flames for a moment, the amber light, the slow rise and fall, the steady presence. Breathe gently. Let the warmth of the fire, even imagined, settle into your chest and down through your arms and legs. You are resting here, in the warm center of the lodge, while the storm moves outside. There is nothing you need to do, only rest. Part 4. The hides that hold the cold away. Let your thoughts drift now to the walls themselves, those remarkable curved surfaces that surround you on all sides, in a warm, enclosing circle. Imagine reaching out and placing your palm flat against the interior surface of the hide wall closest to you. It is smooth in some places and slightly rough in others, textured by the scraping and stretching that went into its preparation. It carries warmth on its inner face from the fire's radiance, but if you press your hand firmly enough, you can feel the cold that lives on its outer surface, held at bay by the thickness and density of the material. Between your palm and the blizzard, there is perhaps only the width of a few inches of treated skin, and yet that few inches is sufficient, at least for tonight. The preparation of each hide was a long and labor-intensive process carried out primarily by women, and the skill required was considerable. A freshly removed bison hide was first pegged out flat on the ground and allowed to dry partially. Then began the scraping, using tools made from bone or antler shaped specifically for this purpose. At the outer surface of the hide was worked steadily to remove any remaining tissue and fat. The hide was then soaked, often in a mixture that included the animal's own brain, a natural emulsifying agent that helped break down the fibers of the skin and made it soft and pliable. This softening process required patience and repeated effort, working the hide by hand or with tools for extended periods, sometimes over multiple days. Once soft, the hide would be smoked, hung over a small smouldering fire in a tightly enclosed space so that the smoke could penetrate every fiber. This smoking was not merely for the smell, though it did contribute to the particular earthy fragrance that hung in the air of every lodge. The smoking served a crucial practical purpose. It made the hide resistant to stiffening when it got wet. An unsmoked hide, once dampened by rain or melting snow and then allowed to dry, would shrink and harden into something almost board-like, losing its flexibility entirely. A smoked hide could be wet and then dried and remain soft, a quality that was essential for garments and lodge coverings exposed constantly to the elements. The lodge covering you rest within tonight is made of many such hides stitched together, and those stitches represent their own kind of artistry. Sinew thread, pulled from along the back of a bison, where the longest and strongest strands run, was used as sewing material. It required an awl, a sharpened bone point, to pierce the tough hide, and then the sinew was threaded through each hole and drawn tight. The resulting seams were strong and, in skilled hands, nearly weatherproof. When sinew gets wet, it expands slightly, I'm actually tightening the seams rather than loosening them. Another elegant coincidence of natural materials working together. The lodge covering was not a fixed, permanent structure. It was packed up, rolled or folded, loaded onto a travois pulled by dogs in earlier centuries, and later by horses when those animals transformed the culture of the plains in the 16 and 1700s. A family could dismantle and reassemble their lodge in a matter of hours, carrying their home with them as they followed the great seasonal movements of the bison herds. The portability of the teepee was one of its defining advantages, and that portability shaped every aspect of its design. Some scholars have compared the teepee favourably to other forms of temporary and portable shelter developed in various parts of the world, arguing that its combination of warmth, ventilation, structural stability, and ease of assembly placed it among the most sophisticated solutions humans have devised for life on the open plains. Others have been more measured in their assessments, noting that it was designed for specific conditions and materials, and would not have translated easily to other environments. Both perspectives have merit. What is clear is that for the people who developed it, over long centuries of refinement and accumulated wisdom, the teepee was precisely right for the life they lived. And tonight, in the middle of this storm, that rightness is evident in the quietness of the lodge's interior. The wind presses, and the snow accumulates, and the temperature outside falls to depths that would be dangerous to anyone unprotected. And yet within these hides, life continues with remarkable steadiness. Babies breathe softly, elders doze, dogs stretch in their sleep, and the fire holds its slow, reliable pulse. You are inside that steadiness now. Let it hold you. Close your eyes for a moment and simply feel the enclosure around you, the curve of the walls, the warmth radiating from the center, the muffled presence of the storm somewhere beyond the hides. You are completely contained and completely safe, held inside a circle of ancient, careful design. Breathe slowly, settle deeper into your resting place. There is no hurry. The night is long, and we have many more quiet hours ahead. Part 5. The layering of warmth. One of the things that becomes clear as the night deepens and you grow more attentive to the details around you is that warmth inside the lodge was not produced by any single source. It was layered. It was accumulated from many directions at once, the way a river is built, not from one raindrop, but from thousands of small tributaries joining and joining again until something substantial and powerful flows. The fire contributed, certainly, but consider also the furs and robes that everyone inside is wrapped in. Bison hide robes, heavy and dense, their inner surface soft from extensive working. Deerskin wraps, thinner but supple and close-fitting. Rabbit fur blankets stitched together from many small pelts, astonishingly light yet remarkably warm because of the hollow structure of each individual hair, trapping air against the skin in the same way that modern synthetic insulation is designed to do, though no one was thinking of it in those terms. Your wolf skin, elk hide, beaver fur, each animal that had lived and moved across the plains contributed something of its warmth to the people who spent their lives in the same landscape. There was a practical reciprocity in this that many native peoples understood and acknowledged, taking what was necessary for survival and doing so with awareness of what was being received. Children were typically the most thoroughly wrapped, their small bodies generating less internal heat and losing it more quickly. A young child asleep tonight might be bundled inside a rabbit skin robe with the fur turned inward against the skin, then covered by a heavier bison robe and nestled between the bodies of parents who provided their own warmth as a final outer layer. Older children curled together, sharing heat the way young animals do, instinctively finding warmth in closeness. Moccasins were stuffed with dry grass or cattail fluff before sleep, creating a layer of insulation around the feet that was simple but effective. Hands might be tucked inside wrapped garments or pressed beneath bodies. Faces were the one area left exposed to the interior air, but the air inside the lodge, even near the walls, was considerably warmer than the air outside, and the slow breathing of many bodies together added moisture and warmth to the enclosed space in a way that made the environment inside feel softer, more contained. The bedding itself deserved attention. Sleeping directly on frozen ground was something every family knew to avoid. The earth in winter, particularly on the plains where permafrost or deep freezing could occur, it drew warmth out of a sleeping body with relentless efficiency. To sleep on bare ground, even with furs on top, was to wake chilled and stiff, the heat stolen from below, while attention was paid to what came from above and the sides. So bedding was elevated, not dramatically, not with elaborate frames or structures, but enough to create a meaningful separation between the sleeper and the ground. Bundles of dried grass or rushes might be laid down first, providing a compressible layer full of air pockets. Woven mats made from reeds went over those. Then hides, positioned fur side up, soft and yielding under the weight of a body. This platform, humble as it was, functioned on the same principle as any modern sleeping pad, creating a thermal barrier that prevented heat from being conducted downward into the cold earth. Some accounts describe willow branches being used as the base layer, their flexible stems providing a gentle springiness that made the sleeping surface more comfortable and also allowed air to circulate beneath the body. Others describe more elaborate arrangements with layers of different materials building up a surface that, by the report of at least one surprised traveller, was more restful than expected given its simple ingredients. Imagine settling onto this layered surface now. The slight give of the materials beneath you, the warmth already beginning to accumulate between your body and the bedding, the weight of furs pressing gently from above. Notice how the cold from the ground does not reach you. Notice how the warmth from the fire, the warmth from the bodies around you, the warmth generated by your own resting body, all of these begin to combine into something steady and sufficient. This is how people slept through the worst nights of the year, not in dramatic defiance of the cold, but in quiet, layered accommodation of it. Each small measure added its contribution to the whole. Each thoughtful preparation made by hands in daylight hours paid dividends in the dark. Let that thought settle you. You are well provided for tonight. The layers around you, literal or imagined, are doing their work. You do not need to manage the cold or fight against the storm. You only need to rest and allow the warmth to hold you. Breathe out slowly. Let your body grow heavier. Let the night carry you a little further inward, a little closer to sleep. Part 6. The scent of the lodge. There is something deeply grounding about the way a place smells. Scent reaches parts of the mind that words and images do not always touch, waking memories and emotions through pathways that bypass conscious thought entirely. And the lodge tonight has its own particular atmosphere of scent, layered and complex and unlike anything in the modern world, yet somehow, in its way, deeply soothing. The dominant note is smoke, wood smoke primarily, carrying the particular resinous character of whatever trees grew near the winter camp. Perhaps cottonwood along a frozen river bottom, perhaps willow, perhaps pine, if the camp was positioned near the foothills of distant mountains. Wood smoke has a quality that is both sharp and soft, catching at the back of the throat in a way that might seem irritating at first, but gradually becomes simply part of the air, part of the texture of the place. is something your body learns to accept and even find comforting. Mixed with the wood smoke is something heavier and richer. The smell of animal fat, tallow, rendered from the bison and used for 100 different purposes: cooking, treating hides, waterproofing garments, fueling small lamps. Where tallow has been melted and applied, where it has dripped and dried and been worked into fibers over many months and years, it leaves behind a warm, dense, almost savory fragrance, something between cooking meat and something earthier, more elemental. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is the smell of warmth being generated and preserved by whatever means were available. The hides themselves contribute a leathery animal scent that is earthy without being heavy. A well-processed and smoked hide smells of the process that made it, out of the smoking fires, of the labor that transformed raw animal skin into something refined and useful. It is a dry smell, grounding, connected to the land and the creatures of the land in a way that is immediate and honest. Beneath all of these runs the faintest thread of something herbal. Perhaps sage, if someone burned a sprig on the fire earlier in the evening. Perhaps cedar, carried in bundles and added to the flames as both an aromatic and a spiritual gesture. These plant scents weave through the heavier animal and smoke notes, brightening them slightly, giving the air of the lodge something almost sweet to counter the density of tallow and leather. And then there is the softer, warmer smell of bodies at rest. Breath and skin and hair. The animal warmth of human beings bundled together in a small space. It is the most intimate of the lodge's scents, and in its way, the most comforting, because it is the smell of community, of not being alone, of being surrounded by living warmth that asks nothing of you and offers its presence freely. Some early observers who wrote about their experiences inside native lodges in winter described the air as suffocating or oppressive, reacting with sensibilities shaped by different habits and different expectations of what an interior space should smell like. Others wrote more generously, describing the interior atmosphere as warm and enveloping, strange at first, but quickly becoming something they associated with safety and rest rather than discomfort. There is ongoing discussion among anthropologists about the health effects of spending long hours in the smoke-filled interior of a teepee in winter, as certainly the eyes would adjust and respiratory passages would adapt over a lifetime of exposure. Whether this adaptation came at a cost to long-term health is a question that does not have simple answers, and the evidence from various sources points in multiple directions. What remains consistent is that generations of people lived this way, survived winter after winter in these conditions, and built cultures of remarkable complexity and vitality within these smoky, fragrant, warm enclosures. For tonight, the scents settle around you like another kind of covering. The smoke, the tallow, the leather, the faint herbal note. All of it wraps you in something that speaks of warmth deliberately made, of care taken against the cold, of life continuing in the dark. Let yourself breathe it in softly. You do not need to analyze or categorize. Simply notice that the air around you smells like a place where people are warm and safe. Let that observation be enough. Your breath is slow. Your body is settled. The scents of the lodge move with each inhale and exhale, steady and present. The storm outside has no scent that reaches you in here. Only warmth, only the interior world fills your senses now. Part 7. The People of the Lodge. You are not alone in here. That is perhaps the most important thing to understand about a winter night inside a family lodge on the northern plains. Solitude was not part of the arrangement. Every interior space was shared, and that sharing was not merely a social preference, but a survival strategy with deep practical roots. The people around you tonight represent a family group in the broad sense that word carried in many plains cultures. Not necessarily a nuclear family in the modern sense, but a collection of people bound by kinship and mutual obligation, who moved together, worked together, and sheltered together through the seasons. There might be grandparents, parents, children of various ages, perhaps an uncle or a cousin, or someone who had been adopted into the family through some previous circumstance. The lodge held them all. Their placement within the lodge was not random. Custom and practicality combined to assign certain positions to certain people. Elders were given places of honour and comfort, often nearest the fire where warmth was most reliable and where their knowledge and authority could be most present, most available if decisions needed to be made through the night. Parents positioned themselves in ways that placed their bodies between the children and the outer walls, where the cold pressed hardest and where drafts were most likely to find their way inward despite all precautions. Infants and very young children were held or nestled in the warmest possible configurations, sometimes pressed against a parent's body beneath layers of shared covering, so that the parent's own heat was communicated directly to the smallest and most vulnerable member of the group. This was not a conscious calculation each time, so much as a deeply ingrained habit, a pattern of care so thoroughly absorbed that it required no deliberate thought. The body knew where the baby belonged in the arrangement of sleep and placed itself accordingly. Dogs occupied the spaces that remained, which in practice meant that they often filled gaps in the sleeping arrangement, pressing their warm, dense bodies against the legs and feet of children or adults who were nearest to the lodge's walls. A dog curled against the back of a sleeping child represented not a nuisance to be managed, but a welcomed addition to the night's thermal resources. Their thick coats, developed over many thousands of years of adaptation to cold climates, held heat with remarkable efficiency, and their steady breathing contributed to the gradual warming of the lodge's enclosed air. The total warmth generated by this collection of bodies, human and animal together, was not insignificant. Each body radiated heat continuously, and adding its contribution to the interior atmosphere, in a way that the fire alone could not sustain through the long hours of the night when fuel was scarce and the flames were banked low. The lodge in its occupied state was a different environment than an empty lodge, warmer by degrees that made a real difference when the temperature outside had fallen deeply below any comfortable threshold. Some anthropologists have described this arrangement as a kind of communal thermoregulation, pointing out parallels with the behavior of many other animals that huddle for warmth in cold conditions. Penguins rotating positions within a group, deer clustering together in sheltered valleys, den animals sharing body heat through the winter months. These are all expressions of the same fundamental principle. Cold is more effectively managed by many bodies sharing heat than by one body generating it alone. Whether the people of the plains thought about it in these terms is uncertain. What seems clear from accounts and traditions is that the closeness of winter lodge life was accepted, even valued, as something that bound people together, that created intimacy and interdependence, that made the long months of snow and cold into a season of particular social richness rather than simple deprivation. Imagine now the steady sound of breathing around you in the lodge. Multiple people in varying stages of sleep, their breath rising and falling in rhythms that are not quite synchronized but are nonetheless related, part of the same enclosed atmosphere. One person sighs softly, another shifts slightly beneath their coverings. A child makes a small, as a contented sound, and is still again. A dog exhales through its nose with a faint whistle of warm air. These sounds together create something remarkably soothing, a kind of collective rhythm that you can allow your own breathing to follow without effort. In, out, slow and easy. The breathing of the lodge is the breathing of something larger than any individual person within it, something that holds all of them together through the night. Soften into that rhythm now. Let your own breath find its place within it. You are part of the warmth in this lodge, contributing your own quiet heat to the whole and receiving the warmth of the whole in return. There is nothing you need to do except breathe and rest. Let the people of the lodge breathe around you. Let the night continue on its slow course. Let the storm carry on with its work beyond the hides, indifferent to the peace within. Part 8. Songs in the Dark. A little while ago, the story was told. Now something else rises gently within the lodge, a sound so soft at first that you might not be sure you are hearing it at all. Might wonder if it is simply a variation in the wind's tone, or an echo of something dreamed. But no, it is a voice, low and unhurried, carrying a melody that has no sharp edges, no sudden rises or drops, only a gentle, winding progression of notes that moves like water finding its way between stones. There are no words at first, only sound, only the human voice shaped into something that exists between speaking and singing, something that belongs to the intimate hours of deep night. This is a lullaby in the oldest sense of the word, not a song composed and named and recorded, but something that emerged in the moment from whoever felt moved to make it, shaped by the mood of the lodge, by the sound of the storm, by the need to give the sleepers around them something steady to hold on to as consciousness dissolved into dream. Music of one kind or another was present in most native households throughout the long winter months. Summer and autumn brought larger ceremonies with drumming and communal singing, but winter nights inside the lodge produced a different kind of music, quieter and more personal. A grandmother humming to an infant, a father tapping softly on a small drum to establish a rhythm that matched the falling snow. Children sometimes participating before sleep claimed them, their high voices joining an older voice for a few phrases before fading out. Some of the instruments used in these intimate nighttime moments were small and simple. Rattles made from gourds or turtle shells filled with seeds or small stones produced a soft rhythmic sound when shaken gently. Small hand drums made from stretched hide over a wooden frame were struck lightly, their tones soft and resonant in the enclosed space of the lodge. Sometimes the only instrument was the human voice itself, sustained and shaped by breath into something that could last for an hour or more without pause, a continuous thread of sound that the sleeping mind could follow into deeper rest. Ethnomusicologists who have studied the musical traditions of various plains nations have noted that lullabies and night songs often shared certain qualities across different groups and regions, and qualities that seem to arise from the practical requirements of sleep music rather than from any shared cultural origin. Slow tempo, repetitive melodic patterns, limited range, staying within a comfortable, non-startling pitch range. These qualities make sense when you understand their purpose, to soothe rather than stimulate, to provide continuity without surprise, to create an auditory environment in which the mind can let go of wakefulness without suddenly being recalled to it. Some scholars have argued that certain songs performed during storms carried additional meaning beyond comfort, that they were understood to communicate with the weather itself, to address the wind or the snow with respect, acknowledging its power while asking for its moderation. Others have been skeptical of this interpretation, with suggesting that the songs were primarily practical in intent, and that their spiritual dimensions have been overstated by outside observers looking for significance. As with many aspects of these traditions, the fullest truth probably resists being neatly reduced to either explanation. What you can observe tonight, simply through attention and presence, is the effect of the sound on the people around you. The child who was turning restlessly in her sleep has grown still. The elder whose brow was slightly furrowed has smoothed his expression into something more peaceful. Even the dogs seem to have settled more deeply into their resting positions, as though the music reaches them too, as though the voice in the dark is a reassurance that passes through all species equally. Let the sound reach you as well. You do not need to analyze it or understand it, simply receive it. A low, winding melody, patient and unhurried, moving through the warm air of the lodge like smoke through still water. Let it enter your breath. Let your inhale match one phrase and your exhale answer with another. The music does not require your attention. It requires only your willingness to be still. The storm continues outside. The voice continues inside. And somewhere in the space between those two sounds, between the howling wild and the quiet human note, sleep waits to receive you. Breathe. Soften. Let the song do what songs have always done in the dark hours of cold nights. Let it carry you gently and without resistance into rest. Part 9. Stories by Firelight. Before the lodge grew fully quiet, there was a story. Perhaps there were several. The telling of stories in winter, particularly on nights of heavy weather when travel was impossible and the hours inside stretched long, was something that many Plains nations engaged in with great regularity and considerable artistic skill. The elder who told the story may have begun quietly, almost casually, while others were still occupied with small tasks or settling their children. The voice was low enough that you had to lean toward the sound to catch it, an effect that was perhaps deliberate, drawing the listeners inward, creating intimacy through the necessity of attention. Stories told in winter lodges during storms covered an enormous range of subjects. Origin stories explaining how the world came to be, or how a particular animal came to have its characteristic form or behavior. Tales of heroes and tricksters, years of hunts undertaken against great odds, of journeys across landscapes that winter made alien. Accounts of encounters with spiritual powers or unusual beings. Stories of ancestors who had faced hardships similar to those being endured tonight and found ways through them that the current generation could learn from. There was a category of story that some nations reserve specifically for winter telling, not to be shared in other seasons, when the conditions that gave them their particular power were absent. Stories about snow and ice, about beings associated with cold, about winters of extreme hardship, or about the spiritual nature of the season itself. These were not casual entertainments, but significant cultural transmissions, carrying knowledge and values through the medium of narrative in a way that was both memorable and emotionally resonant. The gestures that accompanied the telling were as much a part of the story as the words. A hand rising slowly to suggest a bird in flight. Both palms spreading wide to indicate the vastness of an open plain. A quick turn of the head to shift from one character's perspective to another. The firelight cooperated, as firelight always does with those who know how to use it, throwing shadows at the right moments, brightening when the story called for revelation, dimming into softness when mystery was required. Children who were still awake watched with complete absorption. The boundary between the story and the storm, between the world inside the lodge and the world being described in the narrative, became permeable in those moments. The howling outside the hides was not a distraction, but a participant, confirming that yes, the winter is real, that the challenges the story addresses are not hypothetical, but present and ongoing, and that the knowledge embedded in the tale has immediate relevance to the people sitting in the warmth of a lodge while snow piles against its walls. Scholars who have studied the oral literary traditions of various plains nations have emphasized how much skill was involved in this storytelling and how much was transmitted through the stories themselves. Not just explicit information, specific plant medicines, navigation techniques, protocols for maintaining social harmony, but also emotional and psychological content, how to face fear without being consumed by it, how to maintain dignity in conditions of scarcity, how to find meaning in hardship rather than only suffering. One missionary who spent a winter with a plains family wrote that he had been unexpectedly moved by a story he could not understand, that something in the rhythm and the voice and the visible response of the listeners had communicated across his ignorance of the language, reaching him in some pre-linguistic place where emotion lives before it becomes articulated thought. He wrote that he fell asleep during the story and that his sleep was better than any he had experienced in months. You are already moving in that direction. The story is perhaps still winding through its final passages as the lodge settles. The voice of the teller has grown softer, as it always does near the end, bringing the listener gently down from wherever the narrative has taken them, returning them to the warm, enclosed present of the lodge and the fire and the night. Let the final images of the story drift through your mind without clinging to them. A white plain, an animal moving slowly across it, a figure following, the distance between them closing gently, an arrival, warmth. You are here, you are warm. The story has done its work, and sleep is very near. Let yourself be returned now to the simple present of your resting body, the weight of what covers you, the steadiness of your breathing, the quiet that has settled over the lodge, like the snow settling over the plains outside. The story is finished. The night continues, and sleep, patient and unhurried, is ready for you. On part 10, what the storm sounds like from inside. There is something worth noticing about the sound of the blizzard as it reaches you inside the lodge. It has been there throughout everything, the story, the song, the quiet conversations, the settling of sleepers into their places. It has been a constant background presence, the way a river sounds when you camp near it, present enough to be heard, but absorbed gradually into the fabric of experience until it is simply part of the place. What does the storm sound like from inside? It changes. That is the first thing to notice. It is not a single continuous note, but a shifting, textured composition that varies with the wind's direction and force. In some moments, it is a deep, low vibration, almost below the threshold of hearing, felt more in the chest than perceived by the ears. In other moments, it rises to something closer to a moan, a long, sustained exhale from the lungs of the winter itself. And then there are the briefer, sharper sounds, the hiss of snow crystals striking the hide walls at an angle, the sudden creak of a pole flexing under an unexpected gust, the soft thump of a larger accumulation of snow sliding from the upper section of the lodge's exterior. Each of these sounds is distinct when you listen carefully, but together they blend into something continuous and, with time, deeply familiar. The lodge itself participates in the sound, the hides vibrating faintly with each major gust, the sinew bindings transmitting the movement of the poles into tiny, barely perceptible flexions of the entire structure. The teepee does not stand rigidly against the storm. It yields slightly and recovers. Yields and recovers, the way a tree bends in wind rather than breaking, the flexibility that is the source of its resilience. Children who had spent their entire lives in these lodges had grown up with this sound as part of winter. It was as familiar to them as the sound of wind through the ventilation gaps of a modern house, or the sound of rain on a window, or the white noise of a city at night. Something that the mind learned to categorize as background rather than foreground. Something that said not danger, but simply winter, not threat, but simply weather. Elders who had seen many dozens of winters developed an almost unconscious ability to read the storm through its sound. A particular shift in the wind's tone might suggest that the worst of it was passing. A certain quality of the snow's hiss against the hides might indicate a change in temperature. These were not magical skills, but learned capacities, pattern recognition built up over years of attentive experience, the same kind of deep knowledge that accumulates in anyone who spends long enough in close relationship with any particular environment. Some accounts describe adults waking briefly through the night to listen to the storm's sound, checking its quality, making a rapid, unconscious assessment of whether any action was required, and then returning to sleep if the assessment was reassuring. Others describe particular individuals designated as something like a night watch person, not formalized in every family or community, but present in some, whose responsibility was to remain in a lighter state of rest through the darkest hours, as available to respond to changes in the storm's behavior or other nighttime contingencies. The sound you are hearing now, in the imagined interior of this lodge, has the quality of the storm's middle hours. The wind is consistent, but not at its most extreme. The snow continues to fall and to be driven against the walls in that steady, almost rhythmic hiss. The poles creak at intervals. The fire crackles softly in answer, as if maintaining its own part in a conversation with the weather outside. Listen to it now. Not as something to be concerned about, not as something that requires your management or response, but simply as sound, as texture, as the voice of winter doing what winter does, moving its vast cold breath across the land, indifferent to the small warm circle of the lodge, but unable to enter it. The sound of the storm is, and in its way, the sound of safety. It is the sound of the thing that cannot reach you. Every howl and every hiss confirms that the hides are holding, that the poles are standing, that the fire continues to burn. The storm tells you, with every push against the walls, that you are inside, and it is outside, and that distinction is complete and sufficient. Let the sounds settle into you the way all persistent sounds eventually do when we stop resisting them and simply allow them to be. Let it become part of the rhythm of your breathing. Let it be the background against which the foreground is peace. You are resting. The storm is doing what storms do. These two things can coexist without difficulty. They have coexisted in this lodge on many such nights before this one, and they will continue to coexist until the morning comes and the wind eases and the world grows quiet under its new layer of snow. Until then, rest. The storm is your lullaby tonight, deep and old and continuous, the longest song the winter knows. Part 11. Food kept overhead, safety stored against cold. As the night deepens and the sounds of the lodge blend together into something undifferentiated and peaceful, your gaze drifts upward one more time toward the convergence point of the poles far above, where firelight barely reaches and shadows gather thickly. There are shapes up there, bundles and pouches hanging from the poles and from cords strung between them, suspended high enough to be out of reach of dogs and children but visible from below. A kind of overhead pantry that organized the family's most essential winter resource along the vertical axis of the lodge's architecture. Pemmican was likely the most important of these stored foods. The word itself comes from a Cree language term, and the food it describes was prepared and used across a wide range of nations and regions, each with their own particular version, shaped by the animals and plants available in their specific territory. At its most basic, pemmican consisted of dried meat, usually bison on the plains, ground or pounded into a coarse powder, mixed with rendered fat, and sometimes combined with dried berries for flavour and additional nutrition. The result was a compact, dense, calorie-rich food that required no cooking, resisted spoilage for months or even years under the right conditions, and could sustain a person through hard physical labour or long periods of cold with relatively small quantities. The preparation of pemmican was a significant undertaking, carried out primarily in the late summer and early autumn, when bison were hunted in largest numbers, and when the weather still allowed for drying meat in the open air. Thin strips of meat were hung on wooden racks and dried by sun and wind over several days. Once fully dry, the strips were either pounded between stones into a coarse, fibrous powder or shredded by hand. Fat was rendered from the marrow bones, and the thicker deposits around the internal organs, melted over heat until liquid, then mixed with the dried meat in roughly equal proportions. If berries were available, dried Saskatoon berries or chokecherries were crushed and added to the mixture, lending sweetness, tartness, and additional vitamins that help prevent nutritional deficiencies over long winters. The finished pemmican was packed into rawhide bags and sealed, sometimes with additional fat poured over the surface to create an airtight layer. Stored in cool conditions, which was never difficult in winter, it kept indefinitely. This was survival technology of the highest order, a way of capturing and preserving the abundance of the late season and carrying it forward through the months when the land offered almost nothing. Hanging overhead alongside the pemmican might be dried fish if the camp was near a river that had yielded good catches before freeze-up. Dried roots and plant foods gathered through the summer. Bundles of medicinal herbs kept dry and protected from moisture. In some regions and among some peoples, dried corn or other cultivated foods obtained through trade with agricultural nations to the east or south. The overhead storage served practical purposes beyond merely keeping food off the floor. Suspended above the level of dogs and children, the stores were reasonably secure against unauthorized access. Elevated in the interior of the lodge, they benefited from the warmth that rose naturally toward the top of the conical space, remaining at temperatures that, while cold, were less prone to the deep freezing that might occur at ground level. And by keeping food visible, hanging in plain sight within the family's sleeping space, the stores served as a continuous reassurance against the anxiety that winter always brought with it, the fear of running short. Imagine looking up at those hanging shapes tonight, in the dim warmth of the lodge. Their outlines are imprecise in the shadows above the firelight's reach, but you know what they hold. You know that the family is not helpless against the storm's duration. That preparation extends into those pouches and bundles. That care taken in sunlit months has become a quiet protection in this dark winter night. There is something deeply settling about knowing that food exists. Not abundance, not luxury, but sufficiency. Enough. The knowledge of enough, held overhead in the darkness, allows the body to release a particular tension that hunger and uncertainty create. The stomach does not need to be full for the mind to be at peace. It only needs to believe that fullness is possible, that tomorrow will offer what today has managed. Let that belief settle into you now. Whatever concerns or uncertainties you carry into your sleep tonight, Let them be held gently by the equivalent of those overhead bundles. The knowledge that provision exists, that care has been taken, that you are not alone in facing what the night requires. Rest now. Breathe slowly. The stores hang in the darkness above you, patient and full. The night is long, and there is nothing urgent to attend to. Only this, only rest. Part 12. Dogs, companions against the cold. The warmth that presses against your legs is not from the fire. It is a living warmth, different in quality from the radiant heat of burning wood, more immediate and body close, carrying with it a faint, not unpleasant animal scent, and the barely audible sound of another creature's slow, contented breathing. The dog that has settled against you tonight is not a guest in this lodge. It is as much a member of the household as any of the people sleeping nearby. Plains cultures maintained relationships with dogs that predated the arrival of the horse on the continent by thousands of years, a bond that was practical and reciprocal in ways that went well beyond simple domesticity. Dogs were workers. Before horses transformed life on the plains in the 16 and 1700s, dogs were the primary means by which families transported their belongings from one camp to another. They pulled the travois, a simple framework of poles dragged along the ground, carrying lodge covers and food stores and all the accumulated material of a family's life. The travois design was elegantly simple, and two long poles attached at the dog's shoulders and dragging along behind, with a frame or basket lashed between them to hold the load. A large dog could carry a meaningful portion of a family's portable belongings, and a working pack of several dogs together could manage quite substantial transport tasks. But the role of dogs in winter lodge life extended far beyond their function as pack animals. Inside the lodge on a cold night, dogs were quite simply additional heat sources. And this contribution was valued. Their thick double coats, undercoat dense and insulating beneath a coarser outer layer, held their body heat efficiently and radiated warmth to whatever they pressed against. A dog sleeping against a child's back contributed measurably to that child's comfort through the long hours, and multiple dogs distributed through the sleeping arrangement could raise the interior temperature of the lodge by meaningful degrees, adding their contribution to the warmth budget of the night. Dogs also functioned as an early warning system through the hours of darkness. Their hearing was considerably more sensitive than human hearing, and their ability to detect movement, scent, and sound at a distance gave the sleeping lodge a layer of security that no human watch person could fully replicate. When a dog stirred and lifted its head in the night, when its ears pricked and its muscles tensed slightly beneath your hand, you had information. Something outside had changed. The assessment of whether that change required action was still a human responsibility, but the initial alert came from a creature whose senses were calibrated for exactly this kind of monitoring. Some traditions associated dogs with a particular sensitivity to presences beyond the ordinary perceptual range of humans, to shifts in atmosphere or energy that preceded some kinds of events. Whether this was literal belief or metaphorical expression varied by nation and individual and circumstance. What was consistent was an appreciation for the dog's attentiveness, its perpetual readiness to notice what humans might miss. The relationship between people and dogs in these winter lodges was one of genuine mutual dependence. The family provided food, shelter, and the warmth of human community. The dogs provided labour, warmth, alertness, and the particular comfort of their company. This was not a sentimental arrangement but a practical one, though sentiment and affection clearly developed within it. Accounts from various sources describe bonds between individual dogs and individual family members that were recognised as significant, that were grieved when broken by a dog's death or loss. The dog beside you tonight has tucked its nose beneath its tail and is breathing in a slow, steady rhythm that mirrors the deeper breathing of the sleeping people around you. Occasionally it twitches slightly, some dream reflex moving through its body, paws flexing as if in pursuit of something in the landscape of its sleep. Then it settles again, fully at ease, its warmth continuing without interruption against your legs. Notice that warmth. Feel how it grounds you in the physical presence of the lodge, how it connects you to the living reality of other bodies sharing this enclosed warm space. You are not in isolation tonight. You are embedded in a network of warmth and presence, human and animal together, every member contributing something to the whole. Let that feeling of embeddedness settle you deeper into rest. You are held from all sides and from below by the warmth of those who share this shelter with you. There is no need to generate warmth alone, no need to hold yourself tightly against the cold. Simply let go. Let the network hold you and drift. The dog breathes. The fire breathes. The storm breathes outside in its cold and gusty way. And you breathe with all of them, steady and slow, moving gently toward the deepest part of the night. Part 13, Sacred Protection. See quiet and unseen. There is something near the head of the sleeping elder that you have been peripherally aware of for some time. A small wrapped bundle, the size of a folded cloth, resting on the mat beside his pillow as deliberately and carefully as a candle placed on an altar. You have not examined it closely. It does not seem like something that invites examination. But its presence in the lodge is not accidental, and its significance, quiet as it is, extends to everyone sleeping within the same circular walls. Medicine bundles, as they have come to be called in the literature of anthropology and history, were deeply personal objects, sacred containers that held materials of particular spiritual significance to their owners. The contents varied enormously, not just between nations but between individuals within the same family, because each bundle was typically assembled in response to a specific visionary experience or spiritual encounter that was unique to its keeper. A smooth stone gathered from a riverbed where something significant happened. A feather from a bird seen in a vision. Dried plants associated with healing or protection. Small objects connected to meaningful events in the keeper's life. The particular combination was private, often not fully described even to close family members. The care given to these bundles was considerable. They were wrapped in protective coverings and handled with attention. They were not casually thrown into a pack or left unattended. When a family travelled, the bundle travelled with them, given a particular place in the arrangement of belongings that reflected its importance. When camp was established, then the bundle was placed in a particular position within the lodge, often at the position of honour associated with the keeper's place in the sleeping arrangement. To keep such a bundle near one's head during sleep was to invite the protective presence it embodied into one's unconscious hours, to place oneself in a relationship with whatever spiritual reality the bundle represented throughout the most vulnerable state of daily life. Sleep was understood in many traditions as a time of particular openness, when ordinary defensive barriers were lowered and the dreaming mind was accessible to influences both beneficial and otherwise. A medicine bundle beside the pillow was a form of spiritual intention, a declaration of which influences were welcomed. Anthropologists who have studied these objects and the traditions surrounding them have noted with consistent respect that the bundles resist reduction to any single explanatory category. They are not simply good luck charms in the folk superstition sense. They are not simply psychological props, though they certainly served psychological functions. They are not simply artistic objects, though they were often made with great care and sometimes considerable aesthetic attention. They are all of these things and something beyond all of them, occupying a space in the understanding of their keepers that does not correspond to any single category in the vocabulary of outside observers. What can be said with confidence is that these bundles were understood to have presence, to be participants in the life of the lodge rather than passive objects within it. In some traditions, there were protocols for speaking to them, acknowledging them, or consulting them at particular moments. Their well-being was attended to as one might attend to a relationship with an elder or a teacher. They were, in the fullest sense, companions. On a night like this, when the storm presses against the walls and the fire burns low and the world outside has become something formless and dangerous, the quiet presence of the medicine bundle beside the sleeping elder communicates something important to everyone in the lodge. It communicates that the family has done what can be done, not only in the practical sense of preparing furs and food and fire, but in the spiritual sense of maintaining the relationships that offer protection beyond the physical. It communicates that the unseen dimensions of reality have been acknowledged and honored, that the night is being faced in fullness rather than in the partial awareness that ignores what cannot be seen. You need not share any particular belief system to feel the quality of calm that this presence adds to the lodge. The bundle rests there quietly, doing whatever it does, while the storm continues and the sleepers breathe and the fire holds its soft light. Its influence is not dramatic. It does not alter the temperature or reinforce the hides or improve the food supply. It does something more difficult to measure, but perhaps equally important in the long accounting of survival. It reminds the people of the lodge that they are not alone in the vastly larger sense, that the forces which shape existence are not indifferent, that relationship with those forces can be cultivated and maintained through care and attention and respect. Rest now with that thought gently in mind. Whatever holds you through your own nights, whatever quiet understandings and relationships give you the sense that you are not entirely alone in the dark, let those be present with you now. Let them rest near you as the medicine bundle rests near the elder, quietly, without demanding attention, simply present and available. You are held from outside the walls by snow and by cold. You are held from inside by fire and by furs and by the breathing of those around you. And you are held from some direction that does not have a name, by something quiet and patient that accompanies every honest attempt at endurance. Breathe into that knowledge. Let your body grow heavier. Let your mind grow quieter. The night is deep and still ahead, and you are very nearly where you need to be. Part 14. The middle hours. There is a particular quality to the middle of the night that is different from any other time. Not the first hours of sleep when consciousness is still close to the surface, and the shift from waking into dreaming is gradual and sometimes perceptible. Not the early morning hours when the body has completed its deepest rest and begins its slow return toward wakefulness. The middle hours are their own distinct territory, the deepest part of the night, the hours furthest from both yesterday and tomorrow, when time seems to slow or stop entirely and the world outside exists at its greatest remove. In the lodge tonight, the middle hours have arrived. The story has long since ended. The quiet melody has faded. The conversations have dissolved into breath. Most of the family has been deeply asleep for some time, their bodies in the heavier stages of rest, where dreams arise from the deeper layers of the mind, slow and often strange and not fully remembered in the morning. The fire has settled further. What was earlier a modest flame is now primarily a bed of glowing embers, orange and red against the darker remnants of the burned wood, pulsing very slightly with each small movement of air within the lodge. The light they cast is dimmer and more uniform than the flickering of active flames. a gentle overall glow rather than moving shadows. In this light, everything in the lodge looks softer, as if the edges of things have been rounded by the warmth. Someone, at some point during these middle hours, will tend to the fire, not with fresh logs necessarily, but perhaps with the careful placement of a few pieces of dried dung onto the embers, or with the addition of a small amount of additional fuel to maintain the glow through the coldest part of the night. This person, whoever it is in this particular family, performs this task with minimal disturbance to the rest of the household, moving quietly, eyes well adjusted to the dim light, hands certain and practiced. The fire is fed and settles back into its ember breathing. The lodge changes nothing. This is the longest stretch of the night. In winter, at high latitudes, darkness can extend for many hours, and the pre-dawn period that would bring light and signal the approach of morning is still far away. Within the lodge, without any external light to indicate the passage of time, the hours move in a way that is measured only by the body's own rhythms, the slow cycling of sleep stages, the gradual cooling and warming of the interior as the fire ebbs and is renewed. You have been drifting for some time already, perhaps, in and out of a light sleep, half aware of the sounds of the lodge and the storm, half present in the early territories of dream. This is a good place to be. The threshold between waking and sleeping is not a wall, but a gradual gradient, and there is no requirement that you cross it sharply or all at once. Many people, particularly in environments where sleep was managed collectively and flexibly rather than according to rigid schedules, moved back and forth across this threshold several times through a night, rousing briefly at sounds or temperature changes before subsiding again into rest. The concept of sleeping in one unbroken stretch from dusk to dawn is a relatively recent development in human rest habits, shaped by the invention of artificial lighting and the demands of industrial timekeeping. Before these developments, it was common for people to experience their night's rest in 2 or more phases, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness that might last for an hour or more. In this middle of the night waking period, people might lie quietly and think, or speak softly with a bed partner, or stoke the fire, or simply rest in a calm state between sleep and consciousness before drifting back into deeper sleep in the hours closer to dawn. Some historians have suggested that this 2-phase sleep pattern was the norm throughout most of human history, and that the middle of the night wakefulness it included was not experienced as insomnia or disruption, but as a natural and often pleasant interval, a time of unusual quiet and mental clarity when the pressures of the waking day had lifted and the full return of daytime consciousness had not yet arrived. A time for gentle thoughts and easy awareness. If you find yourself in something like this state now, somewhere between full sleep and full wakefulness, that is exactly where you are meant to be. You do not need to force your way into deeper sleep. Simply rest where you are and let your thoughts move slowly and without effort. Let the sounds of the lodge and the storm be present in your awareness without demanding anything of you. The middle of the night is holding you now. The cold outside is at its deepest point, and the warmth inside is doing its steady work. The lodge breathes around you, the people sleep, the embers glow, and the storm continues its ancient patient business beyond the hides. There is nothing to do, no place to be. Only this quiet middle of a winter night, as still and deep as any night has ever been. Let yourself be here. Let your body be heavy. Let your breath come easily and without effort. Drift gently. The night has many hours left. You are safe and warm and held, and there is no rush at all toward morning. Part 15. Dream Country. The mind in sleep travels differently than the waking mind. The sleeping mind is not bound by the ordinary rules of space and time, by the requirement that events follow one another in a sensible sequence, by the need to maintain a consistent perspective or a stable sense of self. In dreams, the landscape is more fluid, the boundaries more permeable, and the logic more associative than linear. For the people of the plains, this dream country was not simply a byproduct of the brain's maintenance processes during sleep. It was understood as a real territory, as genuinely accessible as the physical plains that surrounded the camp. Experiences that occurred in dream were not automatically discounted as unreal or less meaningful than waking experiences. They were events in a different realm, governed by different rules, but capable of carrying genuine information and genuine significance. Visions received in dream were attended to carefully. A hunter might wake from a dream about a particular animal and take that dream seriously when planning the next day's activity, not as a literal prediction necessarily, but as a piece of information from a part of reality that waking consciousness could not access directly. An elder might be visited in dream by the voice or presence of an ancestor and receive guidance from that encounter that they would carry into their waking deliberations. This was not understood as wishful thinking or as a confusion between imagination and reality. It was a different epistemology, a different way of understanding how knowledge could be obtained and what kinds of sources were credible. And the sources that were credible in the dream territory were different from those credible in the waking world, but they were no less real within their own domain. Children were often taught from an early age to pay attention to their dreams and to report them to elders or parents in the morning, particularly if the dream seemed unusual or vivid or emotionally significant. This early attention to dream experience was part of a broader education in the kinds of perception and awareness that would serve a person throughout their life. Not everyone became someone who received significant visions in sleep, and those who did were understood to have a particular gift or calling that carried its own responsibilities. But everyone was taught to take the dream world seriously as one of the domains in which human beings existed. On a winter night during a storm, with the extraordinary atmospheric conditions created by the combination of extreme cold, firelight, close quarters, shared warmth, and the continuous sound of the wind, the conditions for vivid dreaming were perhaps particularly favourable. The body, warm and physically comfortable, could release the tension of daily survival for a time. The mind, carried to the edge of sleep by stories and songs and the rhythm of the storm, might cross more easily into the deeper territories of dream. What do the people around you dream tonight? You cannot know, any more than they could know your dreams. But you can imagine. The elder might dream of a time when he was young and the herds were vast and the summer grass grew higher than a horse's back. The mother might dream of her children in some future season, grown and capable, facing their own winters. A child might dream of the story told earlier this evening, its images transformed by the alchemy of the dreaming mind into something wilder and more personal than the teller's words could have made it. And you, what do you carry into this night's dream country? Perhaps nothing more than what this evening has given you. The warmth of the fire, the sound of the storm turned gentle by the hides, the breathing of other lives around you, the smell of smoke and tallow and leather, the knowledge that preparation and care and community have made this night survivable, even peaceful, even beautiful in its way. Perhaps that is enough to carry into sleep. Perhaps the dreams that arise from these simple materials will have a quality of groundedness and warmth that the more turbulent contents of ordinary waking life do not always produce. Let your eyes close fully now. Let whatever images arise behind them be welcome. You do not need to direct or manage the dream country. It will take you where it takes you, with the particular wisdom that sleep has always had about what the sleeping mind needs. The lodge is around you. The storm is outside. The fire is at the center. The bundle rests near the elder's pillow. The dog breathes against your legs. All is as it should be. Go now into the quiet country of sleep. The night is deep and long, and you are completely, thoroughly safe. Dream well. Part 16. Before Dawn. There is a change in the quality of the darkness. You cannot see it exactly, because the smoke hole above you shows only the same black nothing it has shown all night. But something has shifted in the quality of the air, in the tone of the storm's sound, in the almost imperceptible intuition that the night is no longer in its deepest hours, but has turned, slowly and without announcement, in the direction of the day. The storm is quieter. Not silent, not finished, but quieter. The wind that drove against the lodge walls through the long hours of darkness with such insistence has moderated somewhat. Its gusts less frequent, its continuous baseline sound softer than it was in the middle hours. Snow is still falling, but the driven, horizontal quality of the blizzard's worst intensity has eased. The snow now falls in something closer to its own direction, downward, less hurried, and more simply itself. Inside the lodge, the change registers in subtle ways. The hides are still. The poles no longer flex and creak with each major gust. The fire's embers, now very low, are not disturbed by the irregular drafts that the wind had been pushing through tiny gaps earlier in the night. The air in the lodge is very still and very warm in comparison to what lies outside. The warmth accumulated through the night by bodies and fire held close by the surrounding walls and by the dense snowbanks that have built up against the exterior. The people around you are in their deepest sleep. This is the irony of the pre-dawn hours, that even as the night begins its turn toward light, the body is at its most thoroughly rested, most thoroughly given over to the restorative processes of sleep, and dreams have cycled through, and those who dream are in their last long cycle, often the most vivid and most remembered of the night's dreaming. Those who sleep without much dreaming tonight are as still as the lodge itself. Their breathing the slowest, and most even it has been for hours. The fire needs tending. In the ordinary routine of the household, someone would have managed this through the night, but the fire is now at its minimum, the embers glowing rather than burning, providing radiant warmth, but no significant light. The interior of the lodge is very dark, the amber glow of the coals barely enough to distinguish shapes from shadows. This is the hour that tests preparation most severely. The fire must not be allowed to go out entirely. Rekindling a fire from scratch in a cold lodge requires effort and materials and time. And a lodge that has grown fully cold in the night is a much harder proposition to warm up again than one where the embers have simply been maintained. This is why someone always took responsibility for the fire's continuity, adding just enough fuel through the darkest hours to ensure that the morning would begin with coals rather than ash. On most nights that someone succeeded, the coals are there now, waiting for the morning's first deliberate attention, ready to be coaxed back into flame with additional fuel and the gentle breath of a person whose face bends close to them. But that is for a little while from now. The household is still sleeping. The pre-dawn is the lodge's most private hour, the hour that belongs most completely to rest. You are resting too. The night has carried you through its length with remarkable ease, given the storm that raged beyond the walls. The furs have been sufficient. The warmth from the fire and from the bodies around you has been sufficient. The sounds of the lodge, the songs and the story and the breathing have been sufficient. The medicine bundle and the hanging food stores and the dogs and the sinew stitching and the snow packed along the walls have all been sufficient. You have been held through the night by the accumulated intelligence of generations, by the knowledge of people who face this exact situation, this same cold, this same darkness, this same necessity of shelter and warmth, more times than can be counted, and who found, each time, that it was possible to come through. Let that knowledge be with you now, in whatever form it reaches you. Let it settle into your body as a kind of ease, a release of whatever residual tension the night might have carried. You have come through. The dawn is approaching. The storm has spent most of its fury, and you are here, warm, rested, held. Part 17. The gathering light. The change when it comes is gradual. A faint lightening of the darkness that falls through the smoke hole, so slight at first that you might dismiss it as imagination. But it continues, increasing degree by almost imperceptible degree, from black to a very deep grey, from deep grey to something that might, if you were generous, be called a dark blue, the specific colour of sky just before the sun approaches the horizon. Inside the lodge, the colours of things begin to emerge from the darkness. The furs take on their warm brown and grey tones. The hide walls, dark with years of smoke, show their textured surface. The poles above gleam faintly where the first thin light touches them. The embers of the fire show now against the brightening interior as orange rather than the bright amber they appeared in the darkness, their relative luminosity diminishing as the morning light grows. The dog at your feet stirs, shifts position, and lifts its head. Its nose works, reading the morning air through whatever fraction of information reaches it from the world outside. It determines something from this reading, perhaps that the storm has sufficiently eased, perhaps simply that morning has arrived, and the household's routines will soon begin. And it stands, stretches fore and aft in the characteristic sequence of a waking dog, and pads quietly to the entrance flap, where it waits with quiet patience. The sleepers begin to stir, and not simultaneously, not with any urgency, but one by one, in the gradual sequence of a household awakening. An elder opens his eyes and lies still for a moment, oriented by some internal sense to the morning. A mother shifts and adjusts the covering of the child pressed against her without fully waking herself. A young man near the fire's edge stretches an arm and blinks at the light. There is no alarm, no sudden call to action. The morning comes as mornings come in places where the relationship between people and time is less rigid than what the modern world requires. There will be work to do, there will be practical necessities to attend to, but the first moments of waking are allowed to be slow. Someone tends the fire. This first act of the morning has the quality of a greeting. Additional fuel is placed onto the coals with care, as small pieces first to encourage the flame, then slightly larger ones as the fire responds and grows. The smoke rises more actively as the fire comes back to life. The temperature in the lodge begins to climb toward comfortable again. The morning smell of rekindled fire adds itself to the overnight accumulation of scents, something fresher, sharper, the smell of new wood beginning to burn. Outside, the storm is nearly finished. The wind has reduced to occasional gusts. The snow has slowed to something gentle and occasional, a few flakes drifting rather than being driven. The great white silence that follows a finished blizzard is beginning to establish itself, a silence so complete it seems to have weight, pressing down on the snow-covered world. with the full authority of winter. Within the lodge, the first quiet conversations of the morning begin. Low voices exchanging the ordinary information of waking, what the night was like, what the morning sounds like from outside, what needs to happen today. Children are more slowly claimed by wakefulness, their bodies requiring more transition time from sleep than the adults around them. Some open their eyes and immediately reach for food. Others lie in the half-conscious state between sleep and waking, still traveling in the territories of the night's last dreams. Food is retrieved from the overhead stores. The fire is given additional fuel. Plans are considered. The practical shape of this post-storm day taking form in the quiet voices of the household. And you remain in the warm, comfortable space between sleeping and waking. Not quite ready to give up the night entirely. I'm still resting in the quality of ease that the long hours have produced. You do not need to rush toward any particular state. Morning is arriving gently, the way good mornings do after nights of genuine rest. The storm has passed, and the world it leaves behind is quiet and white, and in its way, quite beautiful. Rest a while longer. The day will be there when you are ready for it. Part 18. The gift of having endured. There is a feeling that follows a survived storm, a particular quality of relief and gratitude that is different from ordinary contentment. It is the felt knowledge that something difficult has passed, that what was uncertain has resolved in favor of life, that the night which posed its questions has received satisfying answers. The hides held, the fire endured, the food was sufficient. Everyone woke. This is not a small thing. In the context of winter on the northern plains, in the time before the protections of modern technology, a storm like the one just passed was a genuine test. Not every family in every winter, on every such night, emerged from it with this same completeness. History carried the weight of those who did not, their stories sometimes told as cautionary examples of what happens when preparation is insufficient or circumstances too extreme. The families who built the traditions that kept people warm and fed, and together through the long winters, did so through accumulated wisdom, through the willingness to learn from experience, through the transmission of knowledge from elder to younger, through all the practices that have been moving through this night like threads through cloth. The fire management, the food storage, the clothing preparation, the lodge design, the songs and stories, the medicine bundles, the shared sleeping arrangements. None of these were separate inventions, but parts of a continuous whole, a complete way of living in relationship with the land and the seasons that took generations to develop and was always being refined and adjusted. To endure a winter storm inside a well-prepared lodge was to participate in that tradition. To wake in the morning with cold cheeks and warm feet and the smell of a rekindled fire and the sound of children beginning to move was to receive the inheritance of all that accumulated knowledge in its most practical form. There is a generosity in that inheritance worth pausing to notice. But every technique that made last night survivable was discovered or refined by someone who was not guaranteed to survive the discovering of it. Every adjustment to the lodge design, every variation in the pemmican recipe, every insight into how to pack snow most effectively as insulation, every song that proved to help children sleep through storms, all of these emerged from real experience carried by real people who faced real danger and shared what they learned. The gift travelled forward through time, from the hands of those who discovered it to the hands of those who applied it, generation after generation, until it reached the family sleeping in this lodge tonight. And through this night's story, in some small way, it has reached you as well. Let yourself receive that gift. Not the specific techniques, which belong to specific traditions and specific peoples, but the spirit of the gift itself. The knowledge that humans, in their best moments, share what keeps them alive. That survival is not only a matter of individual cunning, but of transmitted wisdom. That you exist tonight in a long chain of beings who have faced cold and darkness and found ways through it and told others how. You are held by more than the lodge tonight. You are held by the full length of that chain, by everyone who endured and then shared what endurance required. Let yourself rest in that holding. Let it be enough. Let the night that is ending have delivered you into the morning as it delivered those who slept in lodges through storms on the open plains, warmly, quietly, intact. The fire is burning. The storm has passed. The morning is here, and you have come through. Closing. Drift into the deep. The story is nearly complete now. The lodge has carried you through the long hours of the night, through the blizzard's peak, and through the quiet hours, and through the slow approach of dawn. And it has done this in the way that good lodges always did, by holding warmth without extravagance, by sheltering without drama, by providing exactly what was needed and not more. You have been inside the hides, beside the fire, among the sleepers, attending to the sounds of the storm and the songs and the stories. You have met the dogs and the medicine bundles and the overhead stores of food. You have breathed the air of the lodge, the smoke and tallow and leather and herbs. You have felt the warmth accumulate through the night, degree by gentle degree, until the interior was as different from the world outside as anything could be. Now let all of that settle. Let the images grow softer. Let the sounds grow quieter. Let the scents fade gently into the background of your awareness. Let the lodge become a feeling rather than a picture, a quality of warmth and enclosure and safety rather than a specific visualized place. Let that feeling be what carries you now. Your body is resting. Wherever you lie tonight, you are warm and you are held and you are safe. The night outside may be cold or dark or loud with its own versions of weather, but you are inside, encircled, held. Your breathing has grown very slow. Each inhale is easy, each exhale complete. There is no effort in the breath. It simply happens, the way breathing has always happened. The most natural thing in the world, or the most continuous gift. Your eyes are closed or closing. Your muscles have released whatever they were holding. Your mind is moving toward the quiet place where thoughts grow simple and then dissolve. The fire at the center of the lodge glows very low. The storm outside has gone almost entirely quiet. The sleepers around you breathe in their slow rhythms. The dog is warm against your feet. The bundles hang in the shadows overhead. The elder sleeps with his bundle beside him. The sinew stitching of the hides holds firm, and the snow outside insulates and protects and covers the world in its white silence. This is the deep of the night. This is where rest becomes complete. You do not need to do anything now. You do not need to think or plan or solve or understand. You only need to be here, inside the warmth, inside the circle, and inside the long, long night of winter on the plains. Let yourself go now, gently, without resistance. The lodge holds you. The fire holds you. The darkness holds you. The slow breathing of everyone around you holds you. You are safe. You are warm. You are resting. And the night, deep and quiet and full of stars somewhere above the clouds, will carry you until the morning. Sleep now. Sleep.